The phone rang at 2:30 in the morning, yanking me out of a deep sleep. I fumbled for it in the dark, my heart already racing. Nobody calls at that hour with good news. When I saw Amy's name on the screen, my blood went cold. Something was really wrong. Uncle Carl? Her voice was shaking like a leaf. Something's really wrong with Dad. I think Susan and Tyler are hurting him badly. My name is Carl Mitchell. I'm 61 years old, and I spent 35 years as a defense contractor before retiring to my lakefront house. I've got enough money to live comfortably, a decent pension, and the kind of peace that comes from a life well lived in business. But Gary, my twin brother, he took a different path entirely. He stayed in Atlanta, worked as an electrician for 40 years. Gary raised his daughter Amy after his first wife died of cancer 5 years ago. He was always the gentle one, the peacemaker. 3 years back, Gary met Susan at a grief support group. She seemed sweet enough, a 42-year-old nurse whose husband had passed. Gary was lonely after losing his wife, and Susan made him smile again. When they got married 18 months later, I had reservations. Something about the way she looked at Gary's house, his savings, his retirement accounts. But Gary was happy, so I kept quiet. That was my first mistake, and I should have trusted my instincts. I'd learned to spot threats in my contracting work overseas. Amy, slow down, I said, sitting up in bed and turning on the lamp. What do you mean they're hurting him exactly? He's lost maybe 30 pounds in 6 months, she whispered. He looks scared all the time. And Tyler lives there now. Tyler was Susan's son from her first marriage. Amy had mentioned him before, a 27-year-old who couldn't hold a job. They make Dad sleep in the converted garage, Uncle Carl. His own garage workshop that he turned into some kind of bedroom. They say it's because he snores, but I think they just want him out of the way. He's not allowed upstairs anymore. Have you tried talking to your father about this situation? I asked, already knowing what the answer would probably be from Amy. Susan's always there when I visit. She answers his phone now, makes excuses when I want to see him alone for coffee. Last week I saw Dad at the hardware store and he looked broken. When I asked if everything was okay, silence. He just said he didn't want to cause any trouble for anyone. That's not like him, Uncle Carl. Dad never backs down. That was Gary. Always avoiding conflict, always trying to keep the peace. It made him a good father but a target for predators. I'm coming down to Atlanta, I said, already out of bed and pulling on clothes. Don't tell anyone we talked tonight, understand? The 8-hour drive to Atlanta gave me plenty of time to think about the situation. Gary and I might be identical twins, sure. But we'd lived completely different lives over the years. I'd made my fortune building infrastructure for the military in dangerous places overseas. Gary fixed electrical problems for his neighbors and charged half what he should have. I'd learned to spot threats from miles away. Gary saw the good in everyone, which made him vulnerable to people like Susan who would take advantage of his kindness. I pulled up to his house around noon the next day. It was a nice suburban place, brick ranch style, mature trees. The property was probably worth close to $2.8 million with the way Atlanta real estate had exploded in recent years. Smart investment. Gary had bought it 20 years ago for $180,000. I doubt he realized just how valuable it had become over the decades. Susan answered the door wearing a silk blouse that cost more than Gary's monthly grocery budget. Her smile was pure plastic and fake. Carl. What a surprise. Gary didn't mention you were coming to visit us. He's been a bit forgetful lately, you know. Thought I'd drop by and see how you folks are doing, I said, looking past her into the living room behind her. New furniture, expensive-looking pieces. A 75-inch television that definitely wasn't their last Christmas when I'd visited Gary and Amy together. Gary around? I asked, noting how Susan stepped outside and closed the door behind her, blocking my view of the interior. He's resting right now. You know how he is, works too hard, doesn't take proper care of himself these days. She stepped closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Actually, I'm glad you're here. I've been worried about him lately, Carl. His memory's not what it used to be. Sometimes he forgets things, gets confused about money and bills. It's concerning, honestly. That was interesting information. Gary had the sharpest mind of anyone I knew. Could wire a house from memory, balance checkbooks perfectly. Maybe I should see him and talk with him, I said, studying Susan's face for any tells or signs of deception. Of course, but he's been having some episodes lately. Don't be alarmed if he seems different or confused about things. She led me around the back of the house to what used to be Gary's workshop. Now there was a bed against one wall. A hot plate sat on his old workbench, and a mini fridge that looked like it came from a college dorm room years ago. The rest of his tools were stacked in boxes, covered with dust. This wasn't a bedroom, it was barely livable storage space. Gary was sitting on the bed, reading a paperback novel. When he saw me, his face lit up, then immediately dimmed again. Susan appeared behind me in the doorway. "Look who's here, honey," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Your brother came to visit today." Gary looked thinner than I remembered from Christmas. His clothes hung loose, and there were dark circles under his tired eyes completely. But what bothered me most was the way he glanced at Susan before speaking, like he needed permission from her first. "Carl, good to see you," Gary said quietly. "Sorry about the mess. I've been organizing my tools and equipment down here recently." "Don't apologize," I said, stepping into the cramped space. "This is your house, Gary. You built this workshop with your own hands." Something flickered in Gary's eyes when I said that. Susan's hand tightened on the doorframe, her knuckles going white with tension. "Well, I'll let you boys catch up," she said. "Tyler should be home soon, he's so excited to meet you, Carl." After she left, Gary and I sat in uncomfortable silence for several long minutes. Finally, he spoke in a whisper. "How's retirement treating you?" he asked, avoiding eye contact. "Still fishing on that lake up in Chicago every morning like before. Can't complain about the peaceful life. Listen, Gary, Amy called me last night. She's worried about you and this situation here." His face went pale as paper. "Amy shouldn't worry about anything. Everything's fine here. Susan takes good care of me, really. This used to be your workshop. Now it's your bedroom. That doesn't seem fine to me, brother." "What happened upstairs exactly?" "I snore," he said quickly, too quickly. "It was my idea to move down here. Susan needs her sleep for work shifts." "What work?" "I thought she quit nursing when you got married last year. She said she wanted to focus on family." Gary looked confused for a moment, like he couldn't remember. "She has a consulting job. Online stuff. Medical consulting work, I think." Before I could ask more questions, we heard voices from the house. Young voices, loud and demanding. Gary tensed up immediately. "That's Tyler and his girlfriend Melissa," Gary said nervously. "They're staying here while they look for their own place. Just temporary." A kid who looked about 27 burst through the garage door without knocking. He had the soft look of someone who'd never worked. He wore designer clothes and a watch that cost more than most people make in 6 months. Pure entitlement written across his face. "So you're the famous Uncle Carl," Tyler said, not offering to shake hands. "Mom's told me all about you. The big shot. Defense contractor," I corrected. "And you must be Susan's son from her first marriage. Tyler, right?" I kept my voice neutral and calm. "Stepson," Gary said quietly, correcting me. "We don't make those distinctions anymore. We're all family now, according to Susan and Tyler." Tyler laughed, a harsh sound. "Come on, Gary. Mom and I don't make those distinctions. We're all family now, right? He looked around the garage dismissively. This place is perfect for you, isn't it? Nice and quiet, out of everyone's way upstairs. I watched Gary shrink a little more. This kid was 30 years younger and treating my brother like a servant. How long have you been staying here? I asked Tyler directly, keeping my voice even and professional sounding to him. About 8 months now. Just until I get my cryptocurrency business off the ground. It's a competitive market, you understand completely. Need to time the investment just right, he continued. The volatility makes it tricky, but the potential returns are absolutely massive. In other words, he was gambling with someone else's money and losing it consistently. I'd seen this type before overseas. Gary's been so generous, Tyler continued with a smirk. Helping with startup costs, letting us stay here rent-free. Real team player. I looked at my brother. His hands were shaking slightly, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. This was systematic intimidation. Tyler, why don't you help me bring in Carl's bags? Susan appeared in the doorway again. I've made up the guest room. Actually, I said, I was hoping Gary and I could spend some time together. Maybe grab dinner, just the two of us. Oh, that's so sweet, Susan said, but Gary's on a special diet right now. Doctor's orders. High blood pressure, you know. I've prepared something suitable for him here, she continued. We can't have him eating the wrong foods and getting sick again. Gary nodded automatically. Yeah, I should probably stick to the meal plan. Don't want to cause any problems or upset anyone here. I spent the rest of the afternoon watching the dynamics in that house. Susan treated Gary like an invalid child constantly. Tyler helped himself to everything, Gary's truck, his credit cards, even his clothes. Gary apologized for existing in his own home. When I went to use the bathroom, I noticed something interesting about Tyler's room. It used to be Amy's childhood bedroom. Now it was full of expensive electronics, gaming equipment, and crypto mining rigs. This kid was living like a king here. Meanwhile, Gary slept on a cot in the garage. The contrast was stark and deliberate. This wasn't just neglect, it was abuse. That evening, Susan prepared dinner for everyone. Grilled chicken and vegetables for the family, but Gary got a bowl of plain soup. When he reached for a dinner roll, Susan gently moved the basket away. Remember what Dr. Price said about your cholesterol, honey. I made a mental note to look up this Dr. Price later. Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. So Carl, Tyler said, cutting into his steak, Mom says you did pretty well for yourself. Defense contracting, right? Good connections? Some, I replied carefully. Mostly overseas work. Infrastructure projects in places most people can't pronounce. Nothing too exciting really. Ever get into real estate? This neighborhood's really taking off. Property values are through the roof around here, you know. I wouldn't know. I'm not looking to buy anything. I watched his face carefully. Why do you ask about that? Tyler and Susan exchanged a look. Just saying, if you ever want to invest, Gary's sitting on a gold mine here. Aren't you, Gary? Tyler continued with a grin. This place must be worth what, $3 million now? Maybe more, right? Gary pushed his soup around the bowl. I guess so. I don't really keep track of those things anymore. Too confusing. After dinner, I helped Gary wash dishes while the others watched television. With the water running, I could speak quietly. Gary, what happened to your savings account? The one you had with First National for 30 years? I asked softly. He dropped a plate. It didn't break, but his hands were shaking badly. How did you know about that account, Carl? Susan handles the finances now, he whispered. It's easier that way. I get confused with all the numbers and statements. Easier for who? I asked, but Gary just looked toward the kitchen door, terrified Susan might overhear our conversation. Who's Dr. Price? I continued. Amy mentioned you've been seeing him regularly for the past few months. He's Susan's friend. He's been helping with my medications for anxiety and the confusion. Sometimes I can't remember clearly. What medications exactly? I pressed. I didn't know you had anxiety problems before. You've always been the calm one. Gary looked toward the kitchen door again. For the episodes. And the forgetfulness. Sometimes I can't think straight anymore, Carl. I'd heard enough for now. Something was very wrong here, and I was going to find out exactly what it was. The next morning, I told them I needed to handle some business in town but would be back later. Instead, I drove to my hotel and started making calls. First call was to Roger Walsh, a lawyer I'd worked with. Roger, I need you to run a financial background check on someone. Tyler Brooks, 27 years old, Atlanta area. Family matter. Personal or professional interest? Roger asked. What exactly are we looking for here? Criminal history? Credit issues? Gambling debts? All of the above. Also look into a Dr. Kevin Price. I want to know if his medical license is current. Give me 48 hours, Roger said. I'll dig up whatever there is to find on both of them completely. Next call was to Amy. I need you to do something for me, and you can't tell anyone about this. Uncle Carl, what's going on? Did you see Dad? How bad is it really? Her voice was strained. Can you get me copies of your father's bank statements for the last 18 months? All accounts, credit cards, everything. Uncle Carl, what are you thinking? Are they stealing from him? Amy's voice cracked. I knew something was wrong here. I think your father's being robbed systematically. But I need proof before I can help him. Can you do this? I have power of attorney for emergencies. Dad gave it to me after Mom died. I'll get the statements. Over the next 2 weeks, I stayed in Atlanta and built my case methodically. I visited Gary every few days. Each time, I noticed more details. Gary had lost more weight. His clothes were getting looser every visit I made. The expensive items in the house kept multiplying. New jewelry on Susan. A luxury car in the driveway I'd never seen. Tyler was always wearing new clothes, new shoes, new electronics. All paid for with money that wasn't his to spend. Roger called back with his findings. Carl, you're not going to believe what I found on Tyler Brooks and Dr. Price. Tyler has gambling debts totaling $180,000 with 3 different offshore betting sites. All accumulated in the last 8 months. Dr. Kevin Price had his license suspended 2 years ago for overprescribing controlled substances to patients. He's not legally practicing. What about the medications he's giving Gary? I asked, my blood beginning to boil. Are they even real medications? Without seeing the pills, I can't say. But if Price is prescribing anything, it's illegal. He has no authority. Amy delivered Gary's bank statements to my hotel room 3 days later. Her face was pale when she handed them over. Uncle Carl, I looked at these before bringing them. Dad's been spending money like crazy. This isn't like him at all. I spread the papers across my hotel room desk and started analyzing the patterns. The story they told made me sick. In 18 months, $280,000 had been transferred out of Gary's accounts. Cryptocurrency investments, luxury purchases, car payments for vehicles Gary didn't drive. His retirement fund had been nearly emptied. His home equity line of credit was maxed out at $150,000. But the most damning evidence came from Roger's property research. Gary's house wasn't just worth $2.8 million in current market conditions. The city had approved a major commercial development project 2 blocks away. Gary's property was perfectly positioned for overflow development potential. Conservative estimates put its value at $3.2 million, possibly more if developed properly. Someone had definitely done their homework on this. I needed to see the financial records myself, which meant getting into that house when Susan wasn't watching everyone constantly. That's when I remembered something from our childhood. Gary and I weren't just identical, we could fool anyone when tried. The plan was simple. Gary would come to my hotel room, and I would take his place in that house overnight. Just for a few nights, long enough to photograph the documents and gather evidence of the systematic theft happening here. Getting Gary out wasn't hard. I called the house and asked Susan if Gary could meet me for breakfast discussions. She agreed, probably hoping I'd offer to help with his medical expenses or contribute money to the household somehow. Gary was nervous when he arrived at my hotel. "Carl, I don't know about this. If Susan finds out I'm gone, what's she going to do? Kick you out of your own house?" I handed him a hotel key card for safety. "Order room service. Watch cable. Sleep in a real bed with clean sheets. I'll be back by morning, brother." We looked so much alike that switching was easy. I put on his work clothes, messed up my hair. I practiced his nervous mannerisms, the way he looked down when speaking, the apologetic tone he'd developed over months. The only real difference was confidence, and I'd have to fake that away completely to maintain the deception successfully. I spent those evenings as Gary, eating soup while Tyler and Susan planned their next moves right in front. They thought they were talking to a confused old man, so they didn't bother hiding their intentions from me. The property appraisal came back at $2.8 million, Susan said to Tyler while I pretended to read a magazine. "If we can get the paperwork signed before Christmas, we can have this place sold by spring break next year." "What about Gary?" Tyler asked, glancing at me sitting in the corner chair. "He's been asking questions about the accounts." "Assisted living," Susan said coldly. "Dr. Price already has the mental competency evaluation ready to file with the court. We just need Gary to sign the power of attorney forms. Once that's done, we can handle everything legally." "And if he won't sign them?" Tyler pressed, eating Gary's food while Gary sat there pretending to be medicated. Susan's voice turned ice cold. "He will sign. The medications Dr. Price prescribed are working perfectly. Gary's becoming very agreeable. They were drugging him systematically. Probably something to cause confusion and memory loss, making it easier to claim incompetence." I sat there pretending to be the man they thought they'd broken, while recording every word on my phone. The next morning, I switched back with Gary and started putting together a legal case that would destroy them. Roger Walsh knew exactly what to do with the evidence. Financial elder abuse, fraud, possibly kidnapping given the forced drugging. "We can file both criminal and civil cases," he continued. "This is a strong case with clear evidence patterns. I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law," I told him. "They tried to steal my brother's life. Carl, you need to understand, this will be public. Court records, newspaper coverage. Are you prepared for that exposure? Roger, they tried to steal my brother's life savings and his home. I don't care if it's front page news." We coordinated with Adult Protective Services, the DA's office, and Atlanta PD for a comprehensive response to the situation. The plan was to present our evidence at the family Christmas dinner Susan was hosting, with witnesses present. December 24th arrived with cold, clear weather that made Atlanta look almost festive and peaceful for the holidays. I arrived at Gary's house carrying a briefcase full of evidence and a heart full of righteous anger. Susan had decorated the living room like a magazine spread, complete with an expensive tree and presents everywhere. Tyler wore a new suit that probably cost $2,000. Gary wore the same clothes I'd seen him in weeks. "Carl." Susan hugged me like I was her favorite relative. "I'm so glad you could make it today. Gary's been looking forward to this all week," she continued with that fake smile plastered across her face. Amy arrived a few minutes later, looking nervous but determined. I'd briefed her on what was about to happen. We sat down to dinner, prime rib for the family, chicken broth for Gary as usual punishment. I waited until everyone had eaten, until they were relaxed and off guard. Then I opened my briefcase slowly. "Susan," I said, pulling out the bank statements, "I wanted to thank you for taking such good care of Gary." "Oh, it's nothing really. He's family," she replied, not knowing what was coming next in this conversation. "That's what makes this so hard to understand." I opened the briefcase and pulled out the financial records completely. "Gary, did you know you've spent $280,000 in the last 18 months? I spread the papers across the table. Cryptocurrency investments, luxury purchases, car payments for vehicles you don't drive. Tyler's gambling debts, Susan's shopping sprees. All paid." Susan's face went pale as paper. "Carl, I don't know what you're implying with these accusations against us." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts backed by documentation." I pulled out the next document set. "This is a property appraisal showing your house is worth $2.8 million. Tyler, did you research this before moving in?" Tyler was staring at the papers like they might catch fire. "I don't know anything about property values, man." "Really? Because this email thread shows you researching commercial development in this area 6 months before you moved. And here's your conversation with a real estate agent about motivated sellers in the neighborhood." I slid printed emails. The silence in the room was deafening. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway clearly. I pulled out my phone and connected it to a small speaker. "This recording is from 3 nights ago." Susan's voice filled the room. "If we can get the paperwork signed before Christmas, we can have this sold." The police arrived 10 minutes later. They'd been waiting outside for my signal to come in and arrest. Justice was served. Tyler got 5 years in federal prison. Susan got 3 years plus full restitution to Gary. Gary recovered $230,000 of the stolen money, plus kept his house. But the real victory was watching him heal. He sold the house for $2.9 million and bought a luxury RV. Last month, I got a postcard from Yellowstone. "The view's better from here. Thanks for bringing me home, brother. Love, Gary." Justice isn't always fast, but worth it. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who smile sweetest, but family loyalty means never letting predators win. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, document everything carefully, and remember that real justice takes time but always comes eventually.